And with that, greetings and salutations, fellow questioners. It is Jason with Big Questions Everything live. It's a monthly time where we all get together, chit chat, hang out. Y'all can throw things at us. It's all good. But it's not just me. Of course, I've got Donny Joe hanging with us. And by popular request, we've got Marquise Williams from SOR and Dr. Dean Bertram from Untold Radio Network. This particular alignment has been in the works for a while. Donnie was like, Jason, we need to get Dean. We need to get Marquise online.
Let them fight.
I was like, okay, I get it. And it's going to be a great time. So yeah, go like always, throw your questions in there. It's going to be a good time. We're going to be talking UFOs, probably other things, but I know Donnie is like, we need to get to talk about UFOs.
Yeah, I've been dying to see these two together on a show together. This is going to be like King Kong versus Godzilla of ufology.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, really? That's where you're going with this? Really?
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting a cage match, but sounds like Donnie set one up. He's like the promoter.
It sounds like we have differing viewpoints here, huh?
Apparently,
I'm the Dana White here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I want to know what you think about this whole thing. So let's get into it.
Yeah. In this corner, yes, by the way, Donnie, you can type comments now because you have access to this. I'm going through the chat and he's like, I can type comments now. Yes, you can. Yes,
I've never seen this post a comment little box before. This is a first time. Wow.
Wow.
He's like one of those videos of the kittens that discover they have, like a tail or more than two, they've got back paws. Like, wait, I have a tail.
I could do things with it.
Yep. Anyway, so yes, this has been in works for a long time, and this is going to be a lot of fun. I think y'all are more in agreement than anything else. That's why I was like, okay, I think it'll be a fun conversation, but I don't know what Donnie's expecting here. So I'm going to take a step back. Donnie, what do you want to have them fight over?
Oh my gosh.
Okay. Okay, real quick. Last night, I had the pleasure of watching you, Jason, and you, Dr. Dean, on your show on Untold Radio. I was lurking. I was actually lying in bed and just listening and kind of enjoying the show. Actually, I thought it was a real fine show. And I was wondering, maybe to introduce this whole discussion, maybe you guys want to kind of recap what you did last night on Dean's channel?
Sure. So we were reviewing Norio Hayakawa's latest post. Or it may not be his latest blog post, but it was a recent one. And essentially, he just asks, why can't we take good, clear photographs of what he considers to be true UFOs? And so he goes and he went down a line of a list like, look, these are major events seen by dozens or even hundreds of people. We have press there. No one's getting clear photos of what he would consider a true UFO, and ask the question, if that's the case, and it's because these things are paranormal, then maybe this phenomena isn't what isn't what it appears to be, and B, maybe has ulterior motives. And that he ends with this thought that it seems that whatever is behind the true UFO movement, implying he thinks a lot of that is government, a lot of things we often see are government built craft, that whatever is behind it cares more about our beliefs and our convictions more than anything else. And what the implications may, and ask what are the implications of that, if that is the case.
Yeah, I think that Hayakawa's last point in that article that you just mentioned about the potential deception and the manipulation of beliefs, perhaps by the phenomenon, is a popular idea which has been introduced into ufology by people like John Keel and Jacques Vallée back in the day, that there certainly seems to be a lot of manipulation around the entire phenomenon, which I totally in accord with. I think it's very difficult to even trust ourselves when we think we've seen something, let alone to trust another source reporting to us. But to the first point in that piece, which is the difficulty apparently in taking good photographs of UFOs or other paranormal phenomenon, is that, to me, that suggests that people mightn't be observing even what they think they're observing sometimes, that perhaps it depends more upon the experiences input into the phenomenon than what we actually think, because otherwise it was just nuts and bolts crafts from outer space. Presumably there would be a lot more photographs. If something legitimate happened at Fatima, like it's something else that Hayakawa talks about, when there were thousands of people and lots of press there, presumably there'd be photos of things dancing in the sky in Fatima, but there isn't any. He talks about specific UFO cases like Farmington, where hundreds of people saw UFOs, multiple UFOs in the sky over a course of 3 days above the town of Farmington, and there's not one photograph of the incident. So things like that make Hayakawa question what's really going on, and I think it's a legitimate point. It makes me think of things again which people like John Keel and Jacques Vallée suggested previously, that if we were to objectively be able to look at a UFO experience from the outside, would we see, if we could see somehow separately from the witness and see it completely objectively, would we be seeing that person looking at a solid craft moving in the sky, or would we just be looking at somebody in a trance staring at something which has somehow triggered a reaction or a perception? Similarly, Jacques Vallée talked about the idea that the phenomenon mightn't be what we see. The reality of the technology might be like when you sit in a cinema and you're staring at a screen. It isn't the screen which is the real technology. The real technology is the projection booth behind you, or in the projection booth behind you, and it's a projector throwing this. So perhaps when people are experiencing something, what they think they're experiencing isn't the phenomenon itself. It's just something that the phenomenon is putting out there or manipulating their ability to see. And I think to me, that's the real value in Hayakawa's piece, to be honest. That what does this tell us about the phenomenon itself if we're lacking really fantastic photo and video evidence, which we should have?
Yeah, I also think that they...
And sorry, just quickly, I'll just add to that. I don't count the US gimbal footage of like Tic Tacs and things, because I think that's just either perhaps a psyop, or it's us filming our own technology, or one group of the defense forces shooting something that somebody else, which belongs to another group of the defense forces. So I don't actually count things like the gimbal footage as anomalous phenomena. I think that's just advanced technology, which we don't quite understand. Just to clarify that before we go down that path.
Well, I guess there's one point that we disagree on, but then the data for the gimbal video hasn't been fully published, so I can only speculate it from my perspective. To your point, I think your perspective is more accurately spoken about. As far as we know, it's probably just advanced technology, if at all, because we can't make any assumptions based off the data they've given us. They've only given us part of the data. The rest of it's classified. So I'll have to concede on that part. But I think to your point about talking, when you were mentioning Jacques Vallée and John Keel, the idea that this phenomena can essentially distort the perceptions of the viewer. It also makes me think of slide 9, which I mention often. This in slide 9, they mention that there's a potential for an enemy of the United States to be able to, and there's a list of things, but one of those is to manipulate the space-time construct and infiltrate aspects of the government and decision makers, as well as psychotronic weaponry. So if you were to take that data point, right, and you look at the way that the phenomena has been observed by humanity, if you will, for thousands of years, you got a pretty clear reason for why we can't observe the phenomena directly with our technology. For one, whatever it is, it's so far advanced in us that our technology it's primitive. It's like somebody who's a painter in a cave who's so used to, splotching things on the wall, and they say, man, I've never been able to catch that really fast moving creature that I've always, it's ridiculous when you think about the difference between technological advancements, if you think about how they can perform. So that's one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is that To the Stars Academy released a reason for why there's some issues with capturing the phenomena on video, and it has to do with electromagnetism. I don't have the specific quote with me right now, but essentially there is an electromagnetic effect on our camera systems, by the way, which are electromagnetic. I mean, everything in our technology is all electromagnetic.
Yeah.
One shock and your phone is dead. You plug your phone into the wall and there's a surge, it's done. Plug it into your computer and there's a surge, it's done. These are effects that happen that we can observe on an everyday basis with our technology. Now apply that to a civilization or a group of people or whatever that have technology that, again, we're observing that seems to be, as Gary Nolan said, thousands of technological revolutions ahead of us. It just makes sense that we wouldn't be able to capture it with our current level of technology.
Do you think we've had better results using like analog photographic technology, like 35 millimeter film?
No. And the reason why I think that is because pilots and Ross Coulthard, for example, even Tim Burchett mentioned, Christopher Mellon mentioned that there are photos in 4K that we've had that have not been published to the public of like unambiguous, this is not human. And they haven't been released to the public because they're classified. So I think that the technology is very well adept at capturing the phenomena. It's just the civilian aspect of it isn't, which is why I think it's funny that NASA is going to use civilian data to investigate the phenomena when it's been very well established that civilian technology isn't good enough. It's like saying that we're going to study the stars, but we're only going to use cell phone cameras to do it. It's ridiculous.
Well, and this is one of those questions that, again, I didn't get a chance to explore last night. It slipped my mind. Like from the cryptozoological side, the best success we seem to have are with cameras that are film, not these stupid things, right? And one of the reasons for that, outside the fact that, you're walking through the woods and you have this is not a true camera, right? It's great for selfies and it's great for really big things, but it's not it's not really a camera the way we mean it. So if like you're in the woods and something hops up 20, 30, 40 yards away, you're not going to get a good picture of that no matter how much time you have, much less a few seconds. You have to have, everyone's like, well, what about all these photos we have of all these wild animals? People were paid a ton of money to go out and be out in the woods for weeks with $10,000, with tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment to get that footage and film.
I think to Norio's point, though, is that he lists most of in fact, I think almost every example he lists is pre-digital technology,
right?
And technology, and he's complaining about the inability of us to see that. Anyway, I think we tend to live in a time historically where when we look at the anomalous, it's much more comfortable to assume that it's some type of advanced technology. And it may be. I have no way. I can't prove what it is or what it isn't. But I do know that an awful lot of this phenomena, including its inability to be captured, whether it's on film or whether it's captured physically or in any other capacity, has a long history in the annals of things like fairy faith and the annals of occultism and the annals of religious belief systems. So I think we live in a point where we want to try to understand it within the construct of our current technological space. In other words, we're kind of in the space age now, and we're advancing here and we're advancing there. I think what we don't like to do is to suggest that maybe none of this is the technology that we potentially think that it is. That's a trap that I'm very conscious of ufology almost being able to not just be able to extricate itself from it. I mean, certainly Keel and Verley and Steiger and people like that with the new ufology in the early 70s tried, but we continue to go back to this assumption that A, the government knows about it, B, that it's technological, C, that it's probably extraterrestrial or something similar. No. But that we haven't actually, we're no further in our understanding from when Philip Klass wrote his wonderful UFO curse, which was, I curse you that no matter how long you live, you're never going to be any closer to the mystery than you are now. We could go back to Donald Kehoe's writings and say we're no closer than we were when Kehoe first penned Flying Saucers Are Real, or when Raymond Palmer was writing about this stuff prior to the Flying Saucer Mystery and Amazing Stories. The technological route to me seems to be a dead end. The ETH seems to be a dead end, or at least only assuming that that's the likely explanation, because we just don't seem to travel anywhere. That said, we might be able to travel anywhere on a more occult fairy lore type one either. It might be inextricable or it might be inexplicable, this entire mystery. But I know that we tend to want to stay in this technological space, and it's a space I have a problem with just because it's gotten us nowhere, at least in a civilian level.
What do you mean? I apologize. What do you mean by what you just said? Because what I think I'm hearing is that by engaging in the technological aspect of the phenomena, we're losing essentially the crux of the actual UFO phenomena.
Yeah, I think that I think the assumption since Kehoe, at least, since the early 50s when the ETH became popular, has been that these are nuts and bolts sources from elsewhere. Then Kehoe suggested
Right.
it was Mars. Then people might suggest Zeta Reticula. Now you might get somebody like
He's talking
Hal
like me.
Puthoff suggesting that it's another tech.
Yeah.
It might be a technology from here, and maybe it is. Maybe it's a technology from here, or the breakaway civilization, which were what we called gods in the
Right.
past, or fairies. But whatever, we seem to be so determined to stay in this technological space since the flying saucer mystery first became popular in the type of way of looking at it in a science fiction construct as extraterrestrial crafts from the stars. But we're no closer to any determination of what it really is than we were in 1950. We just aren't.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. I think that's a very interesting perspective because it's true. I mean, you're talking about how we've essentially failed with trying to figure out what this phenomena is, and then convey that to the general public, at least people like us, or like people, the OGs of ufology, right? But when you think about what that implies, you may be, it seems like to me, you might be suggesting that there may be an alternative angle to view this phenomena from. For example, spiritual, psychic, or other dimensional, which I think they've kind of dabbled in that with David Grush's comments and others like Jacques Vallée, for example, that this is a potentially multidimensional phenomena. But when you're trying to engage the general public, they can't handle that kind of. I mean, think about what it takes for me to understand what multidimensional meant. I still don't fully understand it, but I had to read so many articles on what that even means, watch videos and TikToks to try to simplify and entertain me, like to get what that means. That there's something that's adjacent to us but imperceptible to our eyes. What does that really mean? It took a lot. Now tell the general public, hey, you know those 30 hours we spent for the last 2 months figuring out what that means? Oh, this is what it is. You can't condense that much time. You got to really study that. So I think for the people trying to tell the public what this is, they need to approach it from a familiar place first. And then when the witnesses come forward, I think the point of disclosure, the planned disclosure has been stated by the recent amendment, is to get people acclimated to these ideas first. It took us years to come to the point we're at right now. And our ideas, at least for me, still change week to week, if you will, especially with the recent light of things. So for the general public, how do you do that once so that it's so effective that whatever understanding of this phenomenon we have, if it changes, it doesn't throw people off like it has some ufologists who've lost faith in the phenomena because of that change throughout time.
No, I see your point. Oh, sorry, no, you go, Jason.
Yeah, I just want you I was actually going somewhere with the camera, but I think I can get back to it from here because I was talking about the digital versus the analog, and I was going to point out that Dorothy Izod, all of that comes from a physical camera with film, right? It's purely analog. So when it comes to specifically the UFOs that are being seen, it's not. I don't think it is not something that's just interacting on the digital side, but it is. But particularly when you watch Izod's footage and you see how genuinely weird it is,
right?
It does start begging questions as are we actually dealing with a physical craft, or are we dealing with something else? Particularly when you have the other elements of high strangeness that accompany her story. And this goes back to your point about multidimensionality, Marquise, and I wanted to point this out. This is one of my little pet peeves. Love Star Trek, grew up on Star Trek, but I also understand that Star Trek's technobabble was technobabble, right?
Right.
And they picked the word photon because for the photon torpedoes, because in the 60s that sounded fancy. In the 90s they gave us quantum torpedoes. Why? Because quantum was the new science word. Everyone's like, ooh, it's quantum.
Well, hold on, I gotta ask. The
Sure.
Bible says in the Bible, I mean, you guys know secret, right? The Bible, Jesus says that the kingdom of heaven is within you and all around you. What does that mean? What does that mean? Do you think it's metaphorical, or do you think it's literal? That the kingdom of heaven is literally within you, that it's everywhere, it's all around us. It is in this space, just imperceptible to us. He makes these parables and these comments in the Bible, Jesus does, about a place where we can go where there's many mansions, Well,
Right.
what do you think to me, that means that there's another place that exists somewhere around here, but
Yeah.
just outside of the visible spectrum to us.
I think
Right.
Where do the
And
demons?
that's
Where do demons go? Where did fallen angels?
Mhm.
Where are the fallen angels that were cast out of heaven? Some of which are here on earth ruling the world, because the devil's world. This is the devil's world, right? He's running things behind the scenes, allegedly, according to the Bible. What is that like? Where there are a lot of implications that even if you're a biblical minded person, we can talk multidimensional to begin with, for anybody who's into that kind of thing. But it's not about it's about something else. That's the whole point.
I think
right. No, and I get that. My point is, and I am as guilty of this as anyone. We find people will find things like, oh, it's a quantum this, or it's multidimensional, to avoid using the word supernatural. It's a way to avoid. Yeah, I'm the first one to say yes. The spiritual world is. You want to use the word? It's multidimensional. It's on a different plane of existence. Right. I think the problem is everyone is already familiar with that. I would suggest the reason we have this push to try and again science-fy it is to avoid the reality that these are supernatural beings, they are spiritual beings that they're often being encountered. And again, because the ramifications. What was C.S. Lewis's point in, or one of the points he very cleverly makes in the Screwtape Letters? He says, if you have to make your human, if you make him a witch, he's a lot of fun to. I'm summing up this whole paragraph. He's a lot of fun to torment. But at some point, his mind must turn to God, because if there's a devil, then there must be a God. However, if you make him a materialist, then you don't have the joy of tormenting him, but his mind will never turn to God because his mind is always on this material plane. He then speculates on the existence of the materialist witch, one which would allow a demon to interact with the human and engage in things that are supernatural, but he would always perceive it as material. And therefore his mind would never go to God. I would suggest that perhaps the reason we're having these walkthroughs and they're trying to throw science-y technobabble at the phenomena is so that people don't recognize it as supernatural and spiritual. It is so that they think of it in purely materialist means, so that they miss the obvious. You're not dealing with aliens from Zeta Reticuli or you're dealing with demons that have and other spiritual beings that we've had encounters with for thousands of years, and we know what they are, so that we don't perceive them to be what they really are.
I think you, Jason, and Marquise both made good, very different points. I think you're right, Marquise, about the idea that we're kind of conditioned in this paradigm now, which has been promulgated by science fiction since the 1950s, that this phenomenon must be extraterrestrial, and it matches our advancement in the nuclear age, our advancement into space. It kind of fits very well in the cultural zeitgeist, and it's so popularized it is going to be hard maybe to change people's minds. I still don't think that's a reason that we shouldn't try to change minds. To Jason's point about it perhaps being an intentional type of spiritual deception, it very may well be, but I think it might also, and I do lean in that direction, as Jason knows. That said, I think there are authors who have written in a more secular space who've said similar things, and we don't necessarily need to use terms like multidimensional, because I think that's just an equivalent way of saying, well, they're extraterrestrials, but they're not from another planet. They're from another dimension over here, right? The reality might be far more complicated, the way that Henry Corbin talks about in his work in the imaginal world, the idea that there is this intersection between our reality here and some other reality. And when we intersect with it, there are moments of a very strange reality which seems realer to us, as most experiences will tell you. They remember their experiences if they've had a contact with something which is non-human intelligence. It's realer to them than when they go to work or when they drive their car or when they go to bed, any of their normal things. It's a hyper-real moment. There might be something there, which Patrick Harper also writes about, for example. There might be this daemonic reality. We might be interconnecting with some intelligence which we don't understand, I don't even necessarily feel comfortable saying exactly where it's from, but if it's presented itself to us as fairies, a couple hundred years ago, and demons a couple thousand years before that, and all these other entities throughout history,
manifestations.
I think we make a terrible mistake now to say, well, our current culture knows better than all of those people who incidentally had far more interactions with them. Like if you look at Irish fairy faith, they really understood what these things were to a degree in how you should interact with them, how you shouldn't interact with them, how you should avoid them, what you should do. There was all this kind of codification. If I'm driving down a back road tonight and I see 4 little men standing around a silver, sphere, I don't know how I'm meant to interact or how I don't want, how I'm not. And that's what most UFO believers are today, or UFO, I shouldn't say believers, UFO experiences. They're not sure of what they're encountering. So I think to throw overboard thousands of years of religious and cultural and various folkloric traditions, and to say, now we know, with those stupid ancestors of ours, though they were all idiots, but now we know we're in the space age. These people are in advanced craft. I think we're falling into our own construct, perhaps the same way our ancestors fell into other constructs.
I got to be honest with you. I think that's actually, so I got to speak directly to both of what you just said. More specifically about the idea that you think there's like an intentional misdirection towards this multidimensional gobbledygook, so to speak, right? Of science fiction and versus reality, or whatever the reality may be. I will say this: I am not of the persuasion that the people that are trying to push for what we call disclosure are in the camp of deception. I think they are in the camp of, oh my gosh, I can't believe this stuff is real. We're lawmakers, we're politicians, we're whatever. But this is something that we've heard about, we've made jokes about, people have been made fun of for, but it's real. And by the way, Elizondo mentioned that some of the people in the Pentagon think it's demonic. Like, they've made it very clear they don't think that this phenomena is extraterrestrial at all. David Grush has made that comment that he said he doesn't know, we can't denote origin because we don't know where they're from. They could be multidimensional or whatever, but he didn't say it was multidimensional. He just threw that as a suggestion because whatever they are, they're coming from somewhere else, but not out in outer space per se. Now, to your point about the idea of history, reflecting on history, I mean, there's everything from gods to the fairies to other mythical creatures that have been talked about by people throughout history. They've changed based off of culture. They've been the jinn, angels, fallen angels, whatever, right? We should never ignore that. And I don't think that's what, I mean, Gary Nolan said on the Need to Know podcast, their documentary, when they first really came out with this phenomena as like really being a thing politically, he said, this is something that's akin to angels, demons, and God. I mean, this is Gary Nolan and the Stanford, world renowned immunologist of Stanford. It's not just some random, UFO researcher. He's a scientist. And Jacques Vallée is the one who mentions, again, we got to look at history. You mentioned this very much so, that history is telling us that this phenomenon has been interacting with us in different ways throughout history. But whatever it is a shell of what it actually is. Now, looking at the post that was done on Reddit, where allegedly the beings are they're not like us. They have no sex organs. They are created, essentially. Hearing about what the phenomena of the craft are supposed to be, where they're built atomically, which means whatever they are, whoever built them, they might not even be the ones flying these things. They're just using something else, an intermediary, to fly these things in our reality. Because whatever it is, isn't here. It's not the ones that we see flying in the sky. They're like automatons. Gary Nolan at the SALT conference said 100% there's something else here. But what we're seeing are AI or like artificial intelligent robot-like beings. He said that at SALT conference. Then this microbiologist posts his post about the beings essentially being created organisms. I think it's pretty clear that we are dealing with something, and it's becoming more and more public, that they're introducing the possibilities to the public, I think, that these things are not what we think they are. None of it is what we think it is. I do not think that there is some grand conspiracy by these people, but by the intelligence community, by the IC. Yeah, I think so, for sure. I think you guys are on track with that. I just don't think it's by the politicians, not all of them.
Well, so here's the thing, right? You don't have to have ulterior motives to be promoting something that's incorrect, right?
True.
If you're being lied to and you think what you have is the real information, right, then you're going to sell that because you believe what you have. That's how a lot of disinformation works, is you find someone and you feed them misinformation, and then that person becomes the person who's getting it out there. So to your point, I don't disagree. I think a lot of people are they may actually genuinely be in of good conscience. They're like, we need to talk about this. Let's get it out here. Let's have a good conversation. My concern is that, and I'll even say it this way, straight out how I read the Book of Revelation. I'm kind of looking at things saying, yeah, well, we kind of know where these things are going. Just because these people have good intentions doesn't mean the people who are giving them information have good intentions, and they've got a plan. They've got
an example of who and what. Just like any comment at all that might be used as a misdirection for the purpose that you're mentioning.
Sure. Okay. Well, actually, let's go back to the whole multidimensional thing, right? Which is the idea. In fact, this is a conversation I had many years ago with a friend of mine who's like, yeah, I don't believe in spirits or supernatural, but he was all about UFOs and aliens. He goes, I said, hold on. Last week you were telling me that you think it's entirely possible that these aliens are energy beings from another dimension. He goes, yes. I said, okay. How would you describe an angel? And he stopped and he goes, well, I never thought of it like that. The second which is why I was doubling down on the point of saying, hey, you're throwing this language out here to create and to sort of give people a backdoor saying, oh, it's not spiritual, it's not supernatural, it's multidimensional. They're extraterrestrials from another dimension. The Crowley's, the people who follow Crowley's religion that he created, right? They will say that to this day, again, the man, even the guy who recreated Enochian magic, after summoning a demon, he called Lamb. He said, today we call them angels and demons. Tomorrow we will call them something else. The people who still practices his rites say that Lamb isn't a demon. It is a species of telepathic extraterrestrial entities. So I would suggest that the attempt to materialize through language is in itself, and maybe a lot of people are trying to do it in a well-meaning way.
So it's inadvertent, essentially, is what you're saying.
For some, yes. Others, the people who genuinely absolutely know what they're dealing with, I don't think it's as inadvertent, but for many people it probably is. They're thinking,
what's the comment though? Like, because I know the legislation, the amendment is very, I mean, again, the purpose of all of this is to get to the truth of it. And I think that the fact that they're saying non-human is explicitly an admission of intention, because what they could do is say extraterrestrial and then poo-poo on the whole thing like you're suggesting. But what they're doing is they're saying, we don't know. We don't even think it's extraterrestrial. They actually made it very clear. Nobody thinks it's extraterrestrial except for Stephen Greer and everybody else who's like in the UFO community, who thinks that ETs are like our space brothers and space gods. It's the people that are, that are in this movement, that are connected to the data, the ones that say empirically that this is real, that are saying, the ones that are pushing for legislation, it's non-human, because we don't think it's extraterrestrial anymore. That's too small-minded. Leslie Keane, everybody that's coming out and talking about this, that's pushing for this movement, they're not using that term, and they're connecting it with the spiritual, because Leslie Keane has made it very clear. We're talking about the lady who wrote the New York Times. Okay, for those of you who don't know, and she said that it's connected to life after death. Why would they mention that if they're not trying to allude to the fact that this is otherworldly, but not like otherworldly, but like spiritual? Life after death is a spiritual concept. It's a concept of consciousness existing after death. Yes. Why wouldn't that be connected to spiritual?
Well, so again, I think part of it is, to your point, who are the people who are actually divulging it, right?
Right.
Because all of these people are intimately connected with the intelligence operations. We can tell you the details of this particular story offline, because I ain't about to get Epstein on this one. But
my gosh, Dean, but Dean, credit for that word, by the way.
You're welcome. Yeah. Thank you for that one, Donnie.
Yeah.
But Dean and I, we've had conversations with someone that if I were to say their name, you would all know who I was. You're like, oh yeah, he would be in the know. He received a call from a UFO researcher who's supposed to be the big researcher, right? He's the guy, and he's independent. He's really pushing for disclosure. And he says, why is this was years ago, but said, why is his number coming from an Air Force base? His caller ID was coming from an Air Force base, not a personal line, right? We look when you talk about people, I just forgot his name. The mailbox, Area 51. Dean, Bob Lazar, thank you.
Oh wow, okay.
Oh
yeah, the mailbox.
What's the mail. Yeah, I knew Dean.
I knew Dean when you said mailbox, I thought you meant the Unabomber.
No. I knew Dean would get me on that. Yeah, Bob Lazar. Norio Hayakawa was the first one to come out and say, "Hey, this guy doesn't smell right. This doesn't smell right." From the beginning, we have this push from intelligence operatives, Richard Doty and others, by military intelligence to push the UFO belief in a particular direction. Okay.
Right.
Now let's get to modern. Let's get to the more modern.
You got to draw a distinction between Doty and Bob Lazar. There's a pretty vast difference between those two characters.
Well, I think if I can just jump in, I think there is a difference, but I think that Lazar and Doty and Stanton Friedman and William Moore and Jamie Shandera, and admittedly Lazar wasn't one of the Avery or their buddies, but it's this group of people and Lazar on the sidelines with John Lear and other people over here that pretty much formulate what you could call, what I call X-Files UFO belief. I mean, without those people, particularly at the forefront, William Moore and Richard Doty, without those people, we wouldn't have the idea of alien underground bases. We wouldn't have the idea of MJ-12. And without Moore, we wouldn't even have the repopularization of Roswell, to be frank. And we know Moore was an intelligence asset by his own confession at the MUFON Symposium in 1989. Mm-hmm. But the UFO community, instead of doing the same thing and saying, well, we better not believe anything any of these people have told us, they just got mad with a messenger for saying that you've had this disinfo thrown at you and spied on. They didn't step back and go, this is 89 too. This is before the X-Files. They didn't step back and go, everything we believe we've just been told was given to us by somebody who was an asset. And I think Lazar potentially, I don't know enough whether to say Lazar is an asset or not, but there are certainly problems, I think, with this acceptance that Lazar, maybe he is well-meaning, but the acceptance that what he told must be gospel truth. He could have been set up just to see things and then be released as to do this spin. I don't know. So Lazar is different to that degree, but Lazar certainly is that other figure, I think, from that period, from the late 70s into the late 80s, who starts to be one of the key figures in introducing X-Files UFO belief. And there aren't many people. What most people believe about UFOs, other than the people you're talking about, Marquise, who now are saying, well, maybe it's something more spiritual. But the average person's conception of Roswell saucer crashes, back engineered craft out of Area 51, secret underground bases, MJ-12, all of this kind of baloney. This is literally, you can point at the half a dozen people who introduced these ideas into the UFO community. And I literally
there's a lot of things in that though that I'm curious about your perspective on. One of those things is like Richard Doty is an admitted counterintelligence agent, and by the way, disinformation agent. He's like admittedly so.
Sure, and don't forget William Moore was his asset, though. Just to put it into context.
No, you are correct. That is 100% correct. But when you connect him to like other UFO researchers who have not aligned with the narrative that's been pushed by Doty at all, I think that's where the problem for me lies. Because Bob Lazar, he just talked about the science behind the tech. Does that mean that now to your point, both of you, he could be given misinformation for sure. But I think that the fact that he mentioned a lot of the propulsion systems as they're being witnessed today, it's a pretty clear indication that he probably knew something. Now, doesn't mean he knew everything, but it definitely means he knew something. And I talked to Jim Goodall, and I know you've probably all heard of Jim Goodall and about his accounts and everything. I'm not sure what your perspective on Jim is, but I think that Jim's account of Bob Lazar, his experience with looking into Bob Lazar and the pushback he had, pretty clear that there's something there if he's telling the truth.
I think there's something there. I'm just not sure if it's a gospel truth or if it's
I don't think anything
story. Yeah. So but I agree with you. Lazar has to be considered separately, but not separately in the fact that he's one of the key individuals that popularized.
No, of course not. Of course
these ideas.
Yeah, but to the point of the
I
ideas,
think those other people. Sorry, you go.
I'm so sorry for I really want to pin on this one idea that, because extraterrestrial is for me it's new, because when I learned about the phenomena, I read John Keel, I read John David Jacobs, I read Jacques Vallée, I read those people, and we're talking about the most credible researchers in the field from the beginning of ufology, and they don't talk about I mean, they mention extraterrestrial because at the time in certain places, but they've definitely made it explicitly clear that we're dealing with something that is far more exotic than extraterrestrial. And they're the ones that are connected intimately with the metamaterial and Gary Nolan and To the Stars Academy, by the way, or now To the Stars. People that are making claims that this is spiritual in nature, it is an extraterrestrial, and they're being attacked by the UFO community because they're not saying that there are space brothers here to help us. I think that's where I get a little bit confused with, like, the narrative is against the UFO community's narrative, which is that there are space brothers.
And then, okay, sorry, Dean, go.
No, I was just going to say, well, I think there is always going to be some disagreements within the community itself. And I know that people like Hal Puthoff and people into the stars and various other people have suggested this might be something more complicated than just extraterrestrials. I still don't think that that is what your average person understands when Tucker Carlson or CNN or anybody else talks about this phenomenon and rolls out Navy pilots saying, well, it's not ours. I think the concept of extraterrestrial is still so dominant that when we see the government taking it seriously, and when we see them use terms like UFO when they're just talking about Chinese balloons, and it kind of triggers that 50, 60, 70-year-old built-up of belief system in what a UFO is, what a flying saucer is. So regardless of perhaps some of the people who, you were right, seem to be insiders, perhaps there is an attempt to maybe going forward change the narrative. You might be absolutely right. I don't see that narrative having penetrated yet, though.
No, of course not. I agree.
And this is the argument that I'm ultimately building. I think, and I always give Donny credit for this observation, because I think one of the weaknesses we have with any of these conversations is the assumption that everyone who's engaged in anything, particularly on a governmental side, is all on the same page and they all have the same information and they're all walking in lockstep. And let's be honest, that's just not possible, right?
No. So
again, I think there's plenty of people running around who are, probably very well-meaning, and again, probably do have, Nick Redfern was writing about the people in the government who claim that they know that aliens are demons, right? They've been talking about that for a while. This is not a new idea.
No.
This stuff is out there. However, if you look at the evolution of, and this is the point I was making, you go all the way back to the 80s when we know for a fact it was being manipulated, to today. Turn on any late episode of Ancient Aliens, and they're not talking about aliens. They're talking about occult material. And occult material has always been a part of the UFO movement. So I get what you're saying. It's like, well, if they want this, why go here? Why talk about death? Because I would argue it's the entire point is to cloud the entire conversation and for people to mix the two and say, oh, okay, well, we can be spiritual beings and they can be and we just give it these terms interdimensional. And this is about life after death. But it's to separate the traditional Judeo-Christian understanding and perhaps even other understandings, Buddhist and Muslim understandings of these phenomena, to create a brand new construct for people to think about this thing through so that people let down their guard. Now, again, do I think everyone's on the same plane and is on the same, I don't think they're all fellow travelers. No, by no means. I think there's a lot of well-meaning people. However, the question is why is there this very deliberate movement within ufology to go from nuts and bolts to straight up occult material, right? Why are there so many people? Why do I have so many reports of people saying, yeah, I was a Christian, I grew up a Christian, but then I got into Ancient Aliens and then I got into the cult. And I'm like, it feels like that should be not the same thing, but it is, right? So
can't you kind of go ahead. Sorry.
I just had a realization, actually, just where you mentioned that. I didn't even consider it. So ironically, you saying that concerns me because Leslie Kean did mention about contacting the dead. As a means to contact the phenomena, and then Gary Nolan also talked about his engagement with the occult in order to get information from the phenomena Whitley Strieber talks about connecting with the phenomena.
Mhm.
And even though it assaulted him, he wouldn't change his experience for the world, he said.
Yep.
Now, I haven't even, honestly, in real time, I'm having a moment of realization. That's concerning. That's actually really concerning.
Well,
I don't know what to say. Yeah.
well,
And I
and
think
that
this
is-
is
sorry,
this is
please.
penetrating to some degree the UFO community. To Marquise's point,
Mhm.
like Joshua Cutchin's book, what is it, Ecology of Souls,
Yeah,
ties the UFO.
everyone needs to go get that book. By the way, well, it's actually like
phenomenon.
2 books. Go get
Yeah.
that
Hold on
book.
one
Joshua
second.
Cutchin's
Ecology of
Ecology of Souls.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it does a very good job of tying in the entire almost history of fairy faith and occult belief and religious practices up to the UFO phenomenon with contacting the other realm or having something to do with the dead. So I do think these ideas are seeping in. And to Jason, I think Jason's point is, yes, this might be an intentional way of a kind of bait and switch. Oh, look, it's ETs. No, it's really your friendly neighborhood demon.
No,
I
no,
think
hold on.
that's
I gotta
Jason's
say,
primary point.
somebody else also mentioned. I don't want to put these people under the bus, but I did an interview with oh my gosh, Steve Bassett, and he said he doesn't care if it's the Antichrist that brings in UFO disclosure, as long as they bring in this disclosure. I've spoken to some people in my community, my listeners, who even said they don't care if, think about, we mentioned the tree of knowledge of good and evil and Adam and Eve eating from that. And they literally were like, well, isn't God the villain in this story? Because the serpent wanted to give them knowledge. You have no idea how sick. I felt sick in my stomach to hear that from my viewers.
By the way, I've seen
yeah.
that theory on Ancient Aliens.
Oh yeah. Oh,
That's a
Oh
absolutely.
my
popular
gosh.
theory.
You guys have literally just made me think about something
No,
different.
they're all about that on Gaia, on Ancient Civilizations. That's the whole theme of the
Jeez.
entire series.
Jeez.
Is that the Tree of Knowledge was actually the good guys.
No.
And,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
I want to,
and God was the oppressor.
while Marquise is pondering, I want to bring up a couple questions because this is a live show, and that is why we get the chance to do this. Real quick, Magnus Zerum asks if Patterson Gimlin was a mechanical camera with film. Yes, it was, because it was 1965, 66. But yes, it was a mechanical. It was an analog camera. He actually had to turn it by hand, crank it by hand. Old-fashioned Polaroids. Get some really interesting pictures with those Polaroids, is all I'm going to say. Swope, and this is going back to topic. Is it possible that it could be all options actual? Actual aliens, government psyop and craft, ancient tech, fae, what we would call demons and aliens, and of course all the other weird crap from around the earth.
Can I just jump in quickly on that?
There's no reason for that kind of language, sir. That's unacceptable.
Now, can I just
I apologize for my use of fae.
Can I just jump just quickly on that one? I do think that we talk about a UFO phenomenon, and we should probably be talking about UFO phenomena. As I've said repeatedly on Talking Weird and on Mysterious Library, if I see a weird light at the back of my 40 tonight and somebody else sees a strange light high in the heavens and somebody else, finds some weird burn marks in their field and somebody else has a weird little man appear by their bed tonight, they might be entirely different phenomena. They might have nothing to do with each other. But I think all belief systems like to go, well, it all must be demonic or it all must be extraterrestrial or whatever, and plug it all in. While some might have a totally normal, a totally mundane, if a rare explanation. One might be ball lightning, one might be some US drone, one might be, some kids went out and did a prank, and one might be a genuine, anomalous, supernatural experience. But we tend to want to lump them all in. And I think the UFO community or UFO authors have spent an awful lot of time over the last 70 years lumping all of these things in as somehow proof of extraterrestrial visitation.
Can I comment? I want to dovetail off that because I think that's an excellent point. There's also this idea. I am of the persuasion, at least at this point, because as you can see, I can be convinced otherwise. But I'm of the persuasion that the phenomena is able to manifest itself in whatever way it wants to, and that people essentially are being their perceptions are being manipulated or spoken to, so to speak, by whatever manifestation they see, whether it be craft or lights or fairies or gray creatures, whatever it may be. My perspective, and this is just because it it makes a lot of sense that the phenomena is manifesting when you hear stories of people in the same situation seeing completely different things when they're engaged with the phenomena. When you hear about how it can make you see a clown, for example, when actually it's a really tall bug-like creature, or who knows if that's even what it is. Whenever you hear again that they're real, but by the way, those grays might be robots that are created by something else. It does make me think that there's something else that's just materializing things in our reality, as a way to either manipulate our perceptions, manipulate the direction of human civilization, to both of your points, and to influence society towards whatever end they want. I do want to mention one thing. Leslie Kean, and a lot of people are mentioning the date 2027. I was just sent a message that I totally forgot about this comment. Leslie Kean said, "I don't want to live in the world. I may not, or I don't know if I want to live in the world after 2027." And that's not the first person that's mentioned that year. Several people, John Ramirez has also mentioned this year, 2027.
Jason mentions that all the time.
Mm-hmm. There have been some other people. This is public information. I'm not revealing anything that I've been told. 2027 is allegedly a year where whatever this is going on, there's something coming, which is what's being alleged today is the reason for the fast push by members of Congress and the Senate to get this phenomena out there. The problem that I see is that there's also a concern that by revealing the truth, we sign our death ticket. Whatever it is about this phenomena that will be told, that is like the kill switch for humanity. I don't know why. I don't know what that means, that I can talk about publicly. But that's what's being said.
I think there is, again, the reason I pointed to 2027 is because of the 2017 alignment. And that's a whole other kettle of fish. But
years. Yeah, you're talking about Elizondo and.
Oh no, not at all.
Okay.
No,
okay.
not at
all.
all.
Mentioned like.
Yeah, no, I did work on the Revelation 12 alignment that got a lot of attention back in the day. Then everyone's like, okay, we'll just forget, because they only put out the people who said the crazy things, like it's the day of the rapture, and it's like, no, that's not what any of this is.
No.
But again, I have a whole book on that, so y'all can read up on that. But my point is, we are told explicitly that people will literally worship the Antichrist, right? And one of the last things that happens is that these three demons that look like frogs come out of his mouth. Like, it's very clear that this is going to, that period of time. Again, I'm not saying it starts in 2027. I'm just saying it has to happen after 2027. But it's very clear people are going to be making choices about whom they serve, right? That is what's going to be going on during that period. And given the severity, a lot of people pointed out, it seems like this isn't as much as a deception as people are literally saying, nope, I want that right there. I want this evil. And so to your point, you asked, again, going back, why this move towards spiritualism? Because I've always thought it would just stay more flesh and blood, nuts and bolts aliens, but it's like they may just come out and be almost like what childhood Zen, where they're like, yep, we're this thing. Now, of course, they were still aliens in that, but my point is, if it's like, nope, we are the serpent in the garden. We are these, you call us demons. We were these things, but it's not really what we are. That's their perspective. We're here to give you this different perspective. It's going to set up come and join us. We, join the dark side. We have snacks, and and this is all a way of familiarizing people and getting them to think, just a little bit differently about it, right? We've been a very hyper materialistic, and I don't necessarily mean that and we can buy stuff. I mean, most churches are functionally deist in today. They believe that there's the supernatural, but it stays over there. It doesn't interact with us. Americans are, even if they're religious, are functionally deist, and they are mostly materialistic in their worldview. This is a change in that slowly. And to the point, I think there is government stuff going on. I think the phenomena itself has things going on. There's multiple agendas going on, right? And I'm certain that there are good people asking, who have genuine concerns, saying, hey, let's do this, right? But then you have to also ask, well, hold on, if the people who are giving them that information, right, if they've got an agenda, then we need to know what that agenda is also before we trust it. And throughout the entire history of this phenomenon, we keep seeing people who pop up and say, "You can trust me," and then we find out, no, you can't, because they were part of this intelligence operation the entire time. So I'm just saying, there's a lot of different people and agendas here. We just can't say, "Oh, it's all one thing."
I just wanted to quickly add for the people in the chat, we're not saying that 2027 is going to be the year that the world ends. Okay, it's going to be. We're saying we're hinting at there's going to be a monumental shift of some sort.
Yeah,
which is not too far off the realm of possibility, because we just had a huge monumental shift 3 years ago. But with regards to 2027, all I can say is 2028 is going to be my year. Oh yeah.
Oh
Just you wait.
The year
That's when Donny Cho rises like a phoenix.
I'll bet.
I see his name on billboards, friends. Oh,
they're gonna make potato chips out of them. You can only eat one at a time.
That's
because they're
the
so
year
hot.
of the Cho.
Cho's Phoenix chips,
and people will be forced to choose.
Wow.
Oh, wink at me, who worships no man. I am no normal man. I'm something else.
I'm something entirely. Only. Anyway. I will say, I appreciate the change with the humor there, because honestly, sometimes I get intense myself. It helps. Mm-hmm. I will say this though, guys. I have an issue with, because it's a very complicated. Just so you guys hear, listen to us have this conversation now. Each one of us has a different aspect of the phenomena. Our perspectives are slightly different, but we agree on the fundamentals of what's going on right now. For the most part, it seems like. I have an issue with when people are, to your point, they have good intentions. We're ascribing malintent, and then you plant that seed in the people who say, well, the government, I've heard this argument, and it's just such a mind-numbing argument. Human beings are bad too. So when an alien assaults a 5-year-old little girl and she's teaching her little sibling how to do inappropriate things, well, we do it too. What the heck kind of how can you accept that? How can you accept that? And that's my they'll use that, like, oh, well, it's the guys that are coming out now, they're all liars because Richard Doty was a liar. But they like Richard Doty because Doty says aliens like ice cream. And so and I'm not kidding. This I know. To the crux of it, it's just about the fact that he says they're just like us. They're cool too. Hey, they're alien. They're extraterrestrial. That's what frustrates me. Grush is saying there's a problem. We got to be concerned. You guys, they're not friendly. They're not here to be your buddy. Watch out, right? Nolan doesn't say that. The difference is, as you guys mentioned, Nolan does not say that. He doesn't even mention about intention. He says, I can do this download thing where I can get information from them. Leslie Keane says, I think the phenomena is dangerous, but I'm also trying to contact the dead because she lost her brother and it hurt her really bad. There's a lot of mixed messages, but ultimately when we look at, you got to be able to, people can't do what we do. They don't have the time for it, first of all, nor the interest or the passion or obsession, whatever you want to call it. So when they have to dumb it down for themselves like we do with politics or football, because we don't have time for that. And so what they do is they say, oh, well, you know what? They're just all liars except for the ones that I agree with. There's an issue. There's a qualitative difference between, and I want that to be known, Grush and even Nolan. But that difference, it's complicated because Nolan is dealing with the science and says there is a phenomena. Grush is dealing with the data and says there is a phenomena. Ross Coulthard is dealing with witnesses and then saying that there's a phenomena. You understand, there's different perspectives, and every single one of them is saying one thing that's the same. This is a problem. The UFO phenomena is a problem. It is not it's not humanity's savior. It is not for our benefit. Something is wrong here. Pay attention. And I think that is what I like to focus on, is that unanimity of this is a problem versus, oh, well, he's contacting, the aliens through downloads. Oh, she's contacting the ghost, the occult. And you get that. Got it. But what's the commonality among all of them? We got a problem here.
I think it's worth just noting quickly, and I think everything you said, dead on. We don't disagree as much as I think Donny made us think we were going with.
Yeah, I was like, Donny was like, he's like, let them fight. I'm like, they don't disagree on anything. Like, what are you talking about?
I just wanted to see the interaction. That's all. Yeah.
But I would like to just quickly say too, something which I think we all should remember, and we're all guilty of it, everybody, is that beliefs do impact the way we view the world. And to think that people in positions of leadership aren't also contaminated by belief systems, whether it's belief in contacting the dead or whether it's belief in friendly extraterrestrials or evil demons or whatever. The history of the world has many leaders and many governments who acted upon a belief in supernaturalism and the belief they were fighting good or they were fighting bad or they were fighting for good or whatever else. You can't, I think, remove that today. So it's interesting that you point out, Marquise, that there are people today who believe this or believe that or believe the other. You have to wonder, even if they are in positions of, somewhat power, or they have a little more perhaps insight than the man on the street, if they aren't still bringing all of this with them when they're interpreting this phenomenon, or when they're interviewing a witness, or when, they want to imagine that they see the data, but their blinders push them to look at the data that way. So I think often we assume that there are people in the military or intelligence or in government who know more than we do. A classic example would be the estimate of the situation written by the Air Force back in, late 40s, early 50s, saying they're ETs. And who was the general who was ultimately responsible for saying, you've got no proof they're ETs? It was literally those guys, that was what they believed. These things were ETs, and it suited their science fiction belief system. Just because they were in the Air Force didn't mean they were immune to the beliefs which were popular of the day. And I think we have to be conscious of that when we hear from even people in power who, as you said, may have good intention. But they're good, as the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Yeah. So some of these people might be misleading themselves, you know what I mean? And us as a result of it.
Yeah, Thanos had good intentions. He wanted to save the universe. That was his intention. It was to save everybody. But he had to eliminate 50% of the current population in order to do it.
There you go.
So,
real quick, yeah, wink at me. I mean, I contacted or I responded, but yeah, I don't show you blocked at all. No one's blocked at you, so I don't know why you think you were blocked.
I don't even know how to block people.
I do, and I'm again. It would be me or Donny. Donny doesn't know.
I wouldn't even know how to do it. How do I do it? Do I like right click over you?
Yeah, look at him trying to. He's just learning how to block people. Be careful, dude. You could accidentally delete something.
I could block Jason. Oh. I figured out how to block people. Oh boy!
Well, now you're too much power. You're in
trouble.
Okay, real quick. Swope has a couple questions off of Marquise's comment about the 5-year-old little girl. I'm going to pop them up real quick, and I'll let y'all respond.
Yeah, I can tell you this full story.
Right.
I will tell you so. If you
Swope just asks, why would an alien do that? Do what they are alleged to do? And why, if they can fly through outer space, why would they come here to sexually assault people?
Dude, I would dive into a black hole for some shrimp. What is he about?
Oh my god!
I would.
Why do you do this to me?
I would cross that event horizon.
You're stupid.
Are we going towards that singularity, baby?
Oh my gosh!
I'm going head first. I'm getting spaghettified.
All right, bro. I gotta keep my composure here, dude. What the freak is wrong? I'm trying not to curse and all this stuff. Like, I'm doing my very best, but that was hilarious. Donny Cho reminds me of not as cool version of Dean Winchester from Supernatural. Dean's awesome, by the way.
Yeah,
but anyway, he's freaking awesome. He's like bromance. I wish he was my uncle or brother, or that would be awesome.
I'm just going to steal that. I'm just going to steal that clip where you're saying Dean's awesome. He's cool. I talking weird.
Listen. I told my lady, I said, I want you to have his baby so I can raise his son, because I would love to have someone with his genetics in my family. That's just how much I like this guy. He's awesome. Anyway,
real quick, apparently he's making Marquise blush. That is Donny Cho's superpower.
It's true. It's true. It's true. I do blush when Donny Cho makes these awesome jokes. Now, let me address this comment about why would they. The one thing that we're ignoring, when that comment, I want to be fair to you, because I think there's a lot of people that ask that same question. There is. I've had people ask me that on my stream. Most of my viewers, by the way, disagree with me. It's awesome. We have a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. So the bottom line is this. the history of the UFO phenomena is that of sexual assault. Bottom line, it's that of hybridization. It's that of going into someone. I mean, Whitley Strieber is one of the most famous UFO abductees and non-human abductees, and he was assaulted violently. So, Betty and Barney Hill both were assaulted. Betty loved it, Barney didn't, and so. And Betty, by the way, had a terrible experience, but she thinks it was good. Like, you have to understand, there's a Stockholm syndrome involved with this phenomena.
Yes,
like unquestionably so. And whatever it's doing things that do get to the point of causing trauma in the abductee or the contactee, or it's manipulating people with what they call now contactees, which are not abductees. They don't get abducted. They get information from these beings. Oh, we're here to love. We love you. We're all just you from the future. We're spirit. Yeah, it's all deception.
You've allowed it.
It's deception.
You made a soul pact with us before you were born.
Yeah. Oh, you made this. The reason why we're doing these inappropriate experience. So the phenomena, the abduction phenomena I'm mentioning, was by a woman who said that she was experiencing the best sex of her life with these non-humans, the best. She loved it. They were giving her the time of her life, and she had an ongoing experience with them, and she wanted to keep it going until one day she has 2 children. Her daughter, her older daughter, about 5 years old, started to do this, teach it to her younger daughter, what she was experiencing with these aliens, and she knew. She said, "How do you know this?" And the little girl said, "It was the small men who taught me." Now, this is not uncommon in the abduction phenomena. You have to do the research, guys, because the bottom line is that there's an ample amount of evidence. If you believe in evidence at all, there's plenty of evidence of a hybridization program or interbreeding. If you want to go back to biblical times, you want to bring the Bible up. The sons of God saw the daughters of man, that they were beautiful and had children to them. They were Nephilim, giants in the time. Like, guys, this is not a new thing at all. Nope. Okay. So when I think about this comment, I get it. To me, it sounds like you just haven't been exposed to that information yet. And I guarantee when you are, you'll be disturbed. You'll be very much so disturbed.
Yeah, there was a woman, perfectly nice woman, forget her name, and she made a lot of these videos talking about how she went back and she did these, regressions. She would hang out on Mount Shasta, but then how she would be taken as a child and they would perform sexual acts on her. And she even describes this one regression where they performed a very painful surgery on her. They're like, well, we need to do this for your children. She thought she had like a couple dozen of these hybrid kids and all that. To Marquise's point, the history of just straight up sexual assault by these aliens is universal. It is there. And to Marquise's point again, this woman clearly had Stockholm syndrome, because she's like, but it was remarkably painful. And I'm like, well, hold on. You're telling me these guys are traveling thousands of light years, but they don't have anesthesia.
Right.
Okay. They supposedly help genetically create us, manipulate us throughout time, but they don't understand that we feel pain. Like,
that's, oh my God.
It's so inconceivable. But it's like, just stop and take that step back and just look at what people actually say. Not what people say about what people say. What do they actually say? What are they actually encountering? And you start realizing there is a very clear pattern here. And to Marquise's point, it goes all the way back to the beginning. If you take Giorgio Tsoukalos and me, and you put us at a table, we are going to agree on the following sentence: the UFO phenomena and the aliens, or the angels and gods of the past, are one and the same. I'm going to agree with that. We are going to agree on the topic. The difference is he's going to say we understand them better now, and I'm going to say no, we got it right the first time. And again, just that question, like, why would they do, if these were Nick Redfern, not a Christian, right? He'll be the first one to tell you if these beings are capable of, if these were just extraterrestrials and they had and they clearly had the technology that everyone believes that they have, and they do, why do we even know they exist? In fact, he points out so many UFO witnesses, it feels like they were set up. And one of the stories that he points out is this lilac farmer in France. He's up walking around. He comes across these 2 aliens gathering lilacs by the bundle, and then they see them like, oh no, we got seen, and they run into their egg-shaped UFO and they fly off. And he's like, that doesn't make any sense. He's like, people have told me, oh, maybe they were taking his biological samples. That's not how you take biological samples.
No.
And you don't just. He's like, so much of this feels like, oh no, you've seen us.
Yeah.
And,
well, there's commonalities with fairy lore, of course, through all of this as well, but with fairies picking things and fairies gathering things and fairies interfering with us. I will just say, because I feel I have to put my skeptical hat on just a little bit occasionally, because sometimes I don't, is I am very suspicious of abduction accounts which are primarily remembered under any type of hypnosis. And I think the works of John Mack, the works of Bud Hopkins, the works of David Jacobs, the works of Edith Fiore, which was the first author I ever read, are incredibly flawed because of their dependence upon these techniques. So much so that Edith Fiore, in her book Encounters, which was the first one I read, which was kind of my gateway to this whole thing, says she had patients come to her who never even had any idea they had alien abduction experiences until she talked to them, under hypnosis. And I'm thinking,
well, I got to say, I've had 2 abduction experiences, and I don't remember what happened after I blacked out, but I remember them very descriptively. I've talked about it on here. I've talked about it on several platforms before, and I don't know what to make of them, but I will tell you, I remember seeing the beings, the 3 little grays with the big heads, big black eyes, the one-piece suit hovering over the floor, which was the weirdest part, going through the back door and then circling around me and leaning forward and saying in my mind, don't worry, we won't hurt you. Wow. I've missed 4 hours of time. Like, I remember that whole experience up to the point where I blacked out. So I am biased in my perspective about the abduction phenomena, but even when you look at the fact that there have been those who have recalled their abduction experience without hypnosis, there is something to be said about that, at least. I will concede that, to your point, there is an issue with the hypnosis factor. But what do you do when you compare that phenomenon, hypnosis, to people who remember assaults from their family members when they're under hypnosis or during therapy, for example? It's literally the same exact thing.
And I think there's a similar problem. There's an excellent book. I wish I could remember the name. They made a Hollywood movie about it, about a father who was, his daughter went to see a hypnotherapist who specialized in this stuff. She came out of it thinking he'd been abused. She somehow then convinced the rest of her family that they too had been abused. The husband went to jail. Eventually, they figured out it was all just confabulation. The husband actually said, well, they were good Christians. He said, I never remember interfering with her. I never remember being a member of this satanic cult. But if my daughter says it happened, it must have happened, because it fit their belief system. And it literally tore the family apart. Some of the other daughters who never remembered it initially, I don't think ever even recanted, because they had such cognitive dissonance. But the original daughter eventually recanted and said this was all just confabulation under hypnosis. So I think there is ritual. I think there is genuine ritual abuse, but I also think there are hypnotic therapists or hypnosis therapists, whatever we want to call them, these people who specialize in that, just like there's some who specialize in alien abduction, who bring all types of expectations to the encounters. I'll just tell one very quick story. I spoke to a woman when I was doing my PhD research here when I still lived in Australia. I went to a lot of abduction conferences and I spoke to a lot of abductees, and I think many of them were telling me genuine experiences. One of the most convincing was a woman. I won't say her name. She also wrote a book. She was one of Bud Hopkins' patients, I guess, or people he was investigating. And she said, for the life of me, I could never remember what these things look like. But Bud, he pushed and he pushed and he pushed until I told him what he wanted to hear, that they were little gray men with, big black eyes and tear-shaped heads and the rest of it. So I think there's an incredible danger of being hypnotized by somebody like Edith Fiore, who said she read Kehoe's book the year it came out in one day, and everyone looked at the skies thinking the ETs were coming. If you go to some hypnotist who has that type of belief system, then you're opening your mind to Lord knows what type of confabulation. So it is dangerous. And by the way, I had bedroom visitations as a child as well, which I've spoken about. I don't think it was an alien abduction experience, but I'll tell you what, it has some real similarities. But I wonder what would have happened if I'd gone to a therapist and laid down what I would have remembered that I didn't remember. I think that's the danger.
Let me ask you, this is where I think we may have a slight disagreement, maybe, because I think what you said is there's nothing inaccurate about any of it. Personally, I mean, it's clear, right? But the one thing that I will say is, are the aliens abducting us? Let's look at this from what we do know, okay? We do know that there are craft flying around in our skies. There have been for, again, in different forms, thousands of years. But recently, in our last 80, 90 years, maybe even longer, if you look at some of the historical accounts that haven't had digital records taken of them, there have been discs, flying saucers for a long time, at least 100 years. And there have been allegedly beings that have come out of these craft, these disc-shaped craft. They look like, I mean, the children in Africa who mentioned these beings that come out of and along with the teachers, and there was a scientist who was there. I mean, we're talking a lot of different people who saw craft, beings, all that great stuff, right? Then you have people who claim that they've worked on these things. Roswell, New Mexico, the crash in Roswell, disc crashes, beings came out, beings were in the craft. They had big heads, black eyes. They were not human, but they kind of had humanoid features. If you were to take that data, and if it is true, and then you kind of line that up with the abduction phenomena, you get a pretty clear picture that these beings are also doing these abduction experiences. People see the craft, they see the beings. The beings are exactly as they're being described by the people that have physically, allegedly seen the beings. I mean, I think that there absolutely is an abduction phenomena that is real, that is physical, that involves their craft and those beings, whether they be created beings, from some kind of a genetic manipulation thing or 3D printing or whatever. They're definitely doing and have been doing actual physical abductions. I am convinced, based off of the information that I just presented. I mean,
I think this might be where we do differ, because I agree people having genuine experiences. People like you who remember it outside of hypnosis, people like myself who had bedroom visitations, who remembers it outside of hypnosis or parts of it. There was something experiential happening. I think the problem is a lot of modern UFO belief, and I don't want to break down everything, because some of it I'm aware of the children in Africa story. I haven't done enough type of skeptical work on it. But the Roswell story, for example, I'm very suspicious of the traditional narrative of that. I'm suspicious for several reasons. One of them is the main idea of there being bodies discovered at Roswell initially comes from Glenn Dennis's description of a conversation he had with a nurse who allegedly said she saw the bodies and she sketched them for him. Now, since then, most UFO, even people who are invested in the Roswell story, are suspicious of many of Dennis's claims. And I met Glenn Dennis. I interviewed him back in the day. Lovely man. But for example, he changed the name of the nurse. The sketch was actually an artist that Dennis paid and said, we can make a lot of money out of this. Dennis goes on to found the International UFO Museum with a couple other people in Roswell, who's a good civic-minded person who understands the Roswell story is going to bring an awful lot of money to the town, and indeed it did. So the body aspect of the story, considering we didn't hear anything about it from 1947 all the way up until when Moore and Friedman start poking around to do the book with Berlitz, I'm a little bit suspicious of how much later that body story came. Did something crash in Roswell? Probably, and I think it was probably something of ours, which Jason and I only spoke about recently.
What about Jesse Marcel? ETs? I mean, Jesse Marcel mentioned, he also talked about this same exact thing. Bob Lazar mentioned allegedly seeing something similar.
Well, Lazar walked that back, though, as far as the alien. Is that what you mean? The body?
He said he doesn't know what it was. He said he doesn't know what it was.
Now. He said they were probably looking at a mannequin. Originally, he kind of said they might have been looking at an alien. And the most recent thing I saw of him saying, well, it was a long time ago. It was a little window. They were probably just looking at a body. They were the little mannequin. They were going to sit in a chair or something. So
you are correct. He has. Yeah. But I just think that when there are people who have allegedly witnessed them physically, and there's a consistency in that. There's it's a pretty clear consistency that the beings look the way that they do. Aside from me, maybe there could be a cultural thing, right? But I was very young when I first had my experiences. But either way, I cannot dismiss, because to your point about people being abducted and having these regressions, there are people who have had regressions where the beings tell them, we are you. We're actually all the same being. As a matter of fact, we are literally one being expressing itself in many different ways. The law of one. They tell them, oh, we are future humans that have come back to help fix something that we made a mistake in the future. Oh, we're Pleiadians who've seen how the plight of humanity and want to help you guys. Oh, we're part of the Intergalactic Federation of, I know all about those kind of accounts. But when you look at the person, Stephen Greer has capitalized on the UFO phenomena. But does that take away from what he did during the disclosure movement when he funded the Disclosure Project and gathered all those witnesses, who, by the way, some of which do talk about those big-headed black-eyed beings? And so I think that we have to, again, this is where, for me, we're a lot of people in the community, and we're all divided in a lot of different things. Blanket, like, well, this person did it, so therefore maybe it's probably being done across the board. And I think that that's kind of what, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of what I'm hearing, is that there are people who capitalize on these stories. So therefore we shouldn't trust the original story that didn't capitalize on it.
No, I think I'm saying that there's cultural contamination and there's belief being intersected all the time with
Well, I
the
don't
actual
disagree with that.
experience. And I think where you can look at the little grey man with the big black eyes and it becoming a relatively popular motif from probably about Close Encounters onwards, certainly not before the Betty and Barney Hill story. And even it morphs after that, because what they saw weren't really greys. They were quite different, really. I mean, we kind of put them in the grey camp. But if you look at Earth, if you
initial, like the initial descriptions aren't anything like.
If you go through books like what's the author who did all those humanoid books, and he goes all the way back to like to prehistory up until the current, what's his name? He has a Spanish name. Wonderful researcher. But even if you just look at the ones which are popular, if we look at everything from Flatwoods monster stories to Hopkinsville goblin stories to the various shapes and sizes of all of the ETs being reported up until this kind of window going into the 70s and forward, where culturally we tend to accept the little grey man with the big black eyes. I think something happened to it's not that I doubt everybody having these experiences, but something happened to us at some kind of collective level where when you say ET and a saucer,
you think the grey.
Nobody thought about a little grey man with big black eyes when you said ET and a saucer in 1951. Do you know what I mean? Around 1965. It took for the popularization of the Betty and Barney Hill story, the popular movie of that.
They said they were little Asian. They thought they were Vietnamese, I believe.
Well, they said different things. If you read Interrupted Journey, and this is why I have problems with the hypnosis as well. Even Benjamin Simon, the psychiatrist who did the hypnosis, never thought they were describing a real experience. Incidentally, if you read Interrupted Journey, which has all of his notes,
I haven't read that.
It's worth reading. I think it will really have a massive impact on you, because if you read it carefully, their descriptions keep changing. Barney describes them as red-headed Irishmen at first, and Simon says, "Why are they red-headed Irishmen?" He says, "Well, I'm black, and I know that traditionally red-headed Irishmen have always been antagonistic to me and people of my race, so I always go out of my way to be friendly to somebody who's a red-headed Irishman in case they happen to be nice."
Yeah, but that's a perception issue, not
but that's what I'm saying. He goes on then to say they're Nazis. They look like Nazis. Betty Hill says one of them has a nose like the comedian Jimmy Durante with this massive nose. Some of the other ones she describes like I think this is a politically incorrect term, but I think it's a term she uses, mongoloid children, because she was a social worker. One second.
That is
the one narrative.
My question is, I think that goes back to saying, like, when we mentioned earlier that they can manipulate our perceptions, right? I mean, I think that they can do that. I think that they can make us see something that's there is a I don't know if it's released. I can't say it. Oh my gosh. There are plenty of people who have screen memories of plenty of different things
that I think is used often as a defense to say when it doesn't fit it. That's what David Jacobs and Hopkins always said. It didn't look like a grey man. It was a screen memory. They tricked you. It was really this grey man. You know, it works.
Donny, before you do, because I got to ask this question. I want to know what you think about this. Because I think this is kind of where I stand with this, and I'm curious. I want to know where and why you stand here. I think that there are plenty of descriptions of beings. There is this one where they're like elves. They have the pointy ears, and they're little people, and they have. There's an account where there's robots, right? This guy sees a robot by railroad tracks, and
lots of
he's like the railroad, you know. Right. Yep. There's all kinds of different descriptions of them, but there is one consistency that's across the board, including those who claim to have been firsthand witnesses of actual live, no hypnosis, no abduction experience, but like we've dealt with gray aliens, military personnel who've claimed to come forward and say that there have been. Phil Schneider, for example, mentioned seeing them. There was a guy who recently, I can't remember his name, but he was on the Matt Ford show, Matt Ford's YouTube channel. And he was an ex-Air Force gentleman who said that he saw these beings, and there were grays. One of them was tall, two of them were small. One of them had a freaking wand in their. I mean, bizarre things. But again, if if you were to look at that and then hear what has been said about the allegations of this microbiologist, again, that has been parroted by Gary Nolan. I kind of feel like somebody like him would probably know that I'm not going to put my stake behind some random Reddit post about a microbiologist who claims that these beings look like gray aliens.
Well,
And then
I think
describes
I think all I'm saying, and I'm not taking away today that is a very common explanation. I'm just unaware of anywhere in the UFO literature prior to Interrupted Journey, which doesn't even describe them as greys, but
Yeah.
now we transpose that. There isn't anything in the UFO literature describing them like that prior to the mid-60s, probably really properly until even the book The Humanoids, the first classic serious book about multiple experiences with these type of creatures, edited by Charles Bowen, which Jacques Vallée's got stuff in it, Amy Michelle's got in it, Jim Lawrenson's, I think, in it, all the heavy hitters of the day, which was originally a special issue of Flying Saucer Report or whatever that magazine was. I think that came out in about 1968, just before the Condon Committee. Even in that book, there are no gray extraterrestrials, not a one. So how come it takes us cult? So I'm not saying now people don't come out and say, back in 1947, I saw the aliens and they were grays. But why didn't anybody see a gray alien until post the kind of popularization that started to kick in the mid to late 60s into the 70s? There isn't any. I'm serious. I mean, I think the one thing I can do well as an historian is look at the historical literature, and I'm unaware of them. I hope if there is something, somebody message or send me a personal private link, because I'd love to see a report that was published, not somebody in 1985 saying I saw a gray alien in 1952.
Yeah, touche.
A report that was published in 52 that said I saw a gray alien.
Do you think that I am of the persuasion that they're literally manipulating material reality at an atomic level at the very least? I mean, Gary Nolan said that when they're working on the metamaterial, there's an isotopic manipulation there, which is, if you guys understand anything about chemistry or a little bit about physics, that's bizarre. How do you do that, first of all, and why? And what are you making? Like, what would be the purpose of that? So if they're able to literally construct something at an atomic level, and you are nothing that you've said is, I just don't understand the conclusion here, which I think I'm maybe misunderstanding. I think that they have appeared to be many things because something is literally manipulating material reality for us. I think that whatever it is either creating these beings in different forms throughout history or making us see them in different ways throughout human history. It has nothing to do with, I don't think grays have been here 1,000 years ago. Maybe they were, maybe they aren't. I don't think they're an evolutionary descendant of us or another being somewhere in Zeta Reticuli. I think they are a created being that was genetically, literally like grown or somehow just created to do for a specific purpose to interact with us, just like every other being that ever existed that's been doing these bizarre things.
I think the only point I can make, which I'm very comfortable making, because I don't know the reality of this.
I'm speculating.
No, I am too. But the only thing I can make that I can comfortably say is there seems to be a cultural construction of the gray extraterrestrial, which starts to kick into place with the publication of Interrupted Journey and going forward to Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And then after that, there seemed to be a dominant way of looking at these ETs as kind of little and spindly with big heads. I can also say with some confidence, but before there was a very firm cultural construct of what these things look like, people saw a wide range, as you mentioned, of different aliens, from robots to goblins to gigantic things to people who looked exactly like us, a wide range of different
dead
things.
Grandparents, dead relatives, right?
And people still do sometimes, incidentally. But so that makes me think whatever the phenomenon is, whether it's physical, whether it's real, whether it's spiritual, whether it's a combination of all these kinds of things, whether it's extraterrestrial, whatever it is, the shape of the phenomenon itself or the way we experienced it literally changed at some period from somewhere between the mid 1960s to somewhere in the 1980s. There was a change in the way we all started to think about and most witnesses started to perceive these things.
Do
you think any of them are real?
Can I throw a monkey wrench in this whole thing right now?
Please do.
So another angle that I've been thinking about was something that a topic that I was actually into before I even got into the whole paranormal scene was the world of psychedelics. Not because I was taking them or anything, but the stories, the implications, the biological and psychological implications of psychedelics, its effect on history, some of the newer theories about how it interfaces with our consciousness. And, I listened to a lot of stories from people who would, for example, go down to Peru and do ayahuasca, or people who would get ibogaine treatment to try to get over heroin addictions. I even did a podcast, I'd say last year, paranormal podcast, but the guy that I was interviewing, he had a story where he just took a bunch of acid, went into a graveyard at like 3 a.m. with a Ouija board just to see if he could see anything. And so I was like, "What did you see?" And he was like,
"Can you tell me what his nationality is? Oh,
let's just say he was from Florida. He was from Florida. He was a Floridian.
Anyway, with his ethnicity.
But the ironic thing is, what he saw was a UFO pass by overhead, like not even like 100 feet above him. That's what he saw, right? So I listened to these accounts from people who go to Peru and go on these ayahuasca journeys with shamans and everything, and the stuff they're reporting is very similar to what a lot of people are experiencing with the phenomena, right? Some people are even reporting seeing a UFO come down land and a bunch of gray aliens come out. Now, these people weren't like originally like paranormal people. Yeah, it might have been in their consciousness and their zeitgeist, but they go there to try to connect spiritually, to get some kind of insight about themselves, right? But at the same time, some people are seeing like these manifestations of these entities, these beings. They're like, welcome to our dimension. And part of me wonders if those two phenomena are kind of linked. If they're like, I'm not implying that people who have paranormal experiences are all tripping or anything. But what if whatever is causing these supernatural experiences that people are having in their minds, what if it's interfacing with their minds the same way something like ayahuasca or DMT does?
Well, that was Terence McKenna's point. Terence McKenna, who's now deceased, was kind of the latter Timothy Leary, and he experimented with DMT and said that you could have these experiences with what he called like the machine elves or something. Literally, gray aliens would come and be excited you could see them. And lots of other people following Terence McKenna's lead supposedly have also encountered these elves.
So to tie into Donnie's point, and I've got a way of answering Marquise, but I want to come back to that here in a second. Personal account, not me taking DMT, but I'll just say family members that I know had friends that were taking DMT, younger, and they were listening. They knew the kid would do DMT sometimes, but they would do the call, the video game thing, and you're listening in and all that. Well, he went off and did the DMT, but he was still he left, like his mic was still on. So he was still in the room so they could hear him. They start hearing, they started screaming to see if they could wake him up or something, because they started hearing what sounded like the room shaking while he was going through this trip. It wasn't him hitting the mic or anything. He said it sounded like the room was at the end of the world.
To the observers? To the people?
Yes. Yeah, to the people. The people who were not in the room, they were not there. They were hearing what was going on. They said, we didn't hear him. We heard something else was in that room with him, and everything felt like it was shaking. So they started screaming to see if they could get him to wake up or something, because he is 100% convinced that while he was doing that there was something else happening in that room. Now, take that one step forward. He calls the family member of mine and says, I think this is real. He goes, what do you mean? He says, well, so my friends and we've been taking DMT, but I was taking it longer. I took a short break, and my friend just came to me and said, hey, I met a purple woman, and she said that she missed you. And he freaked out because he had never told this friend about the purple woman that he would talk to on his DMT trips. Now, for those who've been studying the DMT phenomena for a little bit, you've heard that story. This is not a one-off thing. Lots of people
similar stories like that. Yeah.
Purple woman, the blue woman, and it's a feminine being that is a cool color, right? Bluish purple, and she will, when they talk to her, she will mention speaking with or missing a friend or a person that you know, even though there's been no contact. This was something that literally is within. It wasn't just something I heard. This is something that went on within my life. One story that I think ties a lot of this together is, to Donnie's point, there's a guy who got off DMT, got clean, and got with Christ because he was out. He liked to trip on DMT. He laid down. He does the DMT, but he's like, it's weird. I stayed in my body. I didn't go through the Stargate. But while I'm sitting there paralyzed, I look over and there is a creature in this room, in the room that I'm in. And he describes it essentially like looking like a tall gray. He said, but the thing looked at me and then got closer because it's like it realized I was still in my body. And he said, the thing that freaked me out is I suddenly realized it was always in. I didn't bring it there. It was there waiting for me to leave. So let me bring it back to Marquise's question at the beginning. Dean doesn't believe or isn't saying that your event didn't occur.
No, that's not what I.
Yeah. He's not even saying necessarily that what you saw or what you encountered isn't necessarily what you saw and encountered. And again, let's go. In that story about the children in Africa, that's actually one of my favorite stories because it is. You've got a lot of witnesses, right? It's very well documented, and I think the broader point here is, whatever the phenomena is, I've got plenty of accounts of people again not needing drugs, not needing hypnosis, having these encounters, and they're seeing trolls, giant birdmen that were dancing with other giant birds on top of water towers, a literal horned demon. And of course, the description he gives, I find really interesting because of the placement of the horns, but it's a whole longer story. The thing is, even let's assume for a moment, there are bodies of these flesh robots and they look like the Greys. We don't necessarily know when those went into production. There could have been some event, something that sort of standardized our perception of them. And so they said, okay, let's make these things. Or perhaps those things are a result, are what caused the standardization. It isn't I don't think it's a zero-sum game here with this.
Yeah. The
simple fact of the matter is we know what's happening here is not what it appears to be, and it is not.
Yeah.
It is lying to us. Again, Whitley Strieber, his wife said, she herself said, this has something to do with what we call death. Whitley Strieber himself admitted that whatever that he's encountering, what he's seeing is not real. Meaning it isn't what he's not seeing what's actually there. Right.
It's kind of like what I say. It's not about the UFO. It's about what is behind that object,
yes,
that thing, that phenomena. And it's not about aliens, because I don't think they're aliens. The question is, what's behind that? It's the passport to Magonia,
Well, I think Greg Bishop touched on this very well in his not read enough article. It's such an important piece in the UFOs Reframing the Debate book, which was published by the late Robbie Graham. And in that book, he writes an article about co-creation, that it seems that something's happening between us and the phenomenon, which creates the reality of the phenomenon. And I mean, that's obviously just a model and just a theory, but I think what we miss in this space are that type of hypothesis or those type of theorists. There aren't enough of them because the phenomenon is so clearly strange. It also seems to me to be culturally bound. And I'm not somebody who's confident to just write it off because of that. But I think we have to ask the questions. Why does it appear the way that it does? Sorry, that was my
I want to, yeah. Oh, no, it's, yeah.
Got plenty
of
kids too, man.
We all do, except for Donnie.
Hey, hi.
Hey, Chloe.
Hi.
Yeah, my baby keeps yelling, by the way. She keeps screaming sometimes, so I'm hoping you guys can't hear that, but
no, it's fine. I want to end with this one question because I think it's a really, really great point. See, now our views are going to go up.
Yep.
Swope says the only thing most encounters sounds like the gods or demonic attacks, and that made me think again. Going back to Genesis 6 is clearly I think it is a history, but I think it's also very much designed to interact with the foundational mythologies of the surrounding cultures. Right. Again, I still think it's real. I think it's history. That's not my point. My point is it's framed in that way because what do we see with a lot of these stories of the demigods, how the demigods were created in the stories? These were clearly sexual assaults.
Yeah. Yep.
And by the way, I'm glad we're not a monetized channel because this wouldn't air. But I wouldn't be surprised if YouTube yanks this.
I try to use the word assault or
Yeah.
like intimate encounter is what I say on my channel.
Or essayed. Yeah, I need to get better at using. They've already locked the comments on one of the things on one of the shows I did. Like YouTube locked it.
Roland, I'm sorry, Roland. Roderick Martin.
Dude, I already
My
taught
show
you
is
how you
Roderick.
get around that. You got to use code words.
I know.
No, I don't know what happened.
Words.
Roderick Martin. I did a whole
Yeah,
show.
so
on forbidden
instead of
knowledge,
that, just say that they cuddled. The aliens come here and they cuddle us, and that ain't cool that they cuddle us.
I do say that.
Cuddle
I
with
say
the
they get up real.
Yeah.
They cuddle
Just
up
gotta
real
use code
closely at
words, that's all.
nighttime. Yeah.
All right. So moving forward, but the point is, we see in all these stories of these ancient gods with the mortal women. It's a cuddle with a struggle, and then we get the demigods, right? So, but it's like that is very, very on brand with what we're seeing today. It is exactly the same phenomena, and I think that's the broader point that we're all making is, this is all the same phenomena, and it's been interpreted many different ways. I think the problem is it's the hubris of modernity that suggests that we have it right now. I just saw Derek's comment. Oh, we're going to hell.
I do say that because it's not only those who know.
Yeah. All right. I said one last question, but with me, there's never one last question. Derek Galloway asks, "What would you do if you had a true paranormal UFO cryptid experience within the next 24 hours?" We'll start with you, Marquise, and we'll work around.
I would fight back. I'm never going to let that happen again without some kind of a resistance, because the first couple times I was just in awe, like I was stunned. And yes, I do understand there is a paralysis effect, but I would fight back this time. And I don't mean physically. I just mean like mentally, energy, praying, whatever it is. I'm going to face these things next time. You're not going to do this to me again. Not like last time.
Well,
Dean?
I know my answer. Oh, go ahead.
We're going to end with you, Donnie. Are you kidding? I know I'm prepared for your answer.
I think it's kind of like, when you have a plan when you get into a fight, and they say everybody has a plan until they get punched in the head. You know what I mean? I think I would go in thinking I'm going to approach this very rationally and see, if my mind's playing tricks on me, or see if I'm being manipulated. But I'd probably just stand there gobsmacked, to be honest.
I will just say I have gone out of my way to make certain I don't have paranormal encounters. I'm always about a good cryptid encounter, because I do think cryptids are, again, I specify cryptids as physical creatures that naturally exist. They're just undiscovered by science. I think a lot of things are called cryptids that are paranormal. So I feel fairly safe about the paranormal thing. But I will say this, to Dean's point, no plan survives combat intact. So
interesting.
Anything it's like, look, I don't know what it's gonna. I don't know, because honestly, no matter how hard you train, no matter how much you think about it, you don't know what you're going to do in that moment. And again, it depends. Like, am I running across a giant 3-foot spider that has crawled out of the pond nearby? Trust me, if that happens, I am not responsible for my actions.
Yeah.
Like, at all. If it's like band burns down neighborhood with improv flamethrower, it's not my fault. There was a 3-foot giant spider. I'm just saying, no plan survives contact intact. Yeah. Donnie?
Well, primarily it would depend on what the actual encounter is. Like, there's a big difference between being abducted by aliens and like having a Bigfoot encounter when you go hiking into woods versus seeing like an apparition in your house, right?
Yeah.
So you can't really gauge how you would react overall in each situation, because they're all different. I can tell you this, though, that regardless of whatever paranormal experience I wind up having, my immediate thought afterwards, maybe not during, but afterwards, is going to be like, well, I guess I got the next topic for my next episode.
Yeah.
YouTube fame, here I come. I'm going to milk this one.
It doesn't make you famous, brother. Trust me. Yeah.
Yeah.
makes you sound crazy.
Well, I'm going on all of them podcasts.
Yeah. Dude, I've been on Coast to Coast. That doesn't, trust me, seeing an actual pterosaur doesn't get you anywhere. You've seen our views. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, come on.
But guys, thank you for watching. This is the first live since we've made the change to be exclusively on this channel. So we really do appreciate y'all. Love all of y'all. Y'all are still the best audience on the internet, but you got to get this out there because again, we're already seeing them messing with our channel. So yeah, get out there, share this around. We appreciate and love every one of you. We love Dean and Marquise. Y'all will be back eventually. We will kidnap you and drag y'all back on against your wills.
And we'll have other conversations on my show as well. There will be a meeting of minds over there. Yeah, there'll be other
Speaking of other channels, we'll do a nice little round robin here. Donnie's new channel is what?
My channel is Donnie Cho Says Stuff. And it comes out once a week, usually around a weekend. It just comes out whenever.
Marquise?
I am on Twitch, and now I'm going to be back on YouTube, but it's only live. So if you're on YouTube, Dimensions of Reality Podcast is my YouTube channel. I know a lot of people go there more than they do Twitch, but on Twitch, it's Dimensions of Reality. So either way, you can catch me there.
All one word, right? Is it all
Dimensions of Reality Podcast is one word. You have to put it in as one word, or else you probably won't find me. Maybe
just
I'm
make sure.
ranked.
And Dean?
Well, I'm on Mysterious Library with Jason every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. live on the Untold Radio Network. And every Saturday night at 10 p.m. Central, I do my show Talking Weird, also on the Untold Radio Network. But I would love it when my daughter makes duck noises in the background. And people go to the shavermystery.com, which will redirect you to my page about the documentary I'm making, the Facebook page about the documentary I'm making, The Man Who Invented Flying Saucers. Thank you.
Awesome.
And that's going to be a great documentary. I've already seen some of the stuff he's done on it. All right, guys. Love y'all. We'll see y'all next time. Be good. Bye, Chloe.